So, Lakshya, I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself, even though I think everyone knows who you are, and then I'll go ahead and start with the first interview question, okay?
Okay. Tawa Chiancapi, Mitakiapi, Anpao Duta Makokia Macha, Yawaslata, Slahan Mataha, Albuquerque Wati, NACA Washi Chomo, Echegla. So, hello everybody. My name is Anpao Duta Flying Earth. I'm Lakota Dakota Ojibwe Autumn from Standing Rock, and I'm Executive Director at NACA, where Maggie works.
Awesome. Thank you for doing this with us, Lakshya. Okay, so first question, what is one thing that has been an obstacle for you?
Yeah, I thought about the question, and there were really two things that jumped out at me, but probably one that's been emerging for a while is identity. And my mom was reflecting with me about the first day of school and how, well, I actually didn't go to my first day of school. I don't know if I should be sharing that as the lead administrator at a school, but just because I didn't want to. And I actually didn't, the first time that I knew I was different was in kindergarten, where kids were asking me, why is my name what it is? You know, I've always been Anpao Duta Flying Earth. Why do I have long hair? So first time I began to differentiate race, I think, where like I thought other kids with dark hair were also native. I didn't, you know, I thought they were just light skinned, and that's where I began to, I think, really distinguish probably phenotype, appearance, where people lived, socioeconomic status, and so everything that ties into identity, right? So that's what jumped out to me.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, next question. If you were to visualize life without this perceived obstacle, what does life look like?
Yeah. I realized I didn't frame it in terms of an obstacle, right? Like, I think the obstacle is prejudice or discrimination. And I think there's layers of that, right? Like you can tie racism into that. A world without this obstacle, I don't necessarily know if it's euphoria, right? Like I think that a world without prejudice on one hand would be a more equitable world, right? Like I think, or the reality and the recognition of whiteness and how this country is built on it, and economic structures, education structures have assumptions of whiteness. I think I wonder what the world would look like without that sort of prejudice towards a certain group having more opportunities than the other. And that's hard for me to kind of imagine, right? Like my critical mind says it's not euphoria. My other mind, my idealistic mind says like, well, people would get along and it'd be much more harmony in terms of like world relations, or and I wonder what would emerge as a system or a structure. But I do think it would, you know, like if there was a switch that happened from today to tomorrow, and that I do think there would be some glaring differences in terms of like, and I think that's the idea of racial healing or racial justice, right? Like, that if you were to unpack or decolonize, if you will, the learned sort of structures and paradigms of how you've operated in society and begin to critically analyze it, I think if there was the flash differences in terms of opportunity afforded to one group of people, specifically with a certain skin color or ethnic background or even national background, yeah, I think we would see that difference.
Awesome. Thank you, Lakshi. Third question. How can you address your perceived obstacle? Which I think you already do on the daily.
Yeah. That one, I mean, I think of a few different ways. I think on one hand, addressing it requires like an individual sort of stance or charge, right? Like at some point, I realized that Mobridge, South Dakota, I didn't feel as welcomed in that town as I did in Walkaballa, South Dakota, right? And one town's a border town, the other is on the reservation. And I also knew that my mom wanted to send me to school. And I went from grades kindergarten to sixth grade in Mobridge. And the reason why I was thinking about the story of my first day of school and then my subsequent experience in kindergarten is because kindergarten is also the place where I developed the tools to be able to respond. Whenever somebody said, "Why do you have long hair? Don't only girls have long hair?" After the first time of tripping up and being like, "Well, I have long hair because I'm cool," or I can't remember what I said. I went home and asked. I was like, "Well, Mom, how come I have long hair?" Because I never second guessed it, right? Like, long hair. She's like, "Well, it's part of who we are, and our ancestors grew long hair, and then the story is about how your hair represents your family, your hair represents strength, the way that you wear your hair is the physical appearance of who you are as a manifestation of who you are as a spirit." So then it got deeper and deeper and deeper, and so that's the place where I began to respond to kids like that. And it was, so the next time that somebody asked me like, "Why do you have long hair? Don't only girls have long hair?" It was like, well, it's because part of who I am is my culture, and begin to be able to navigate it, right? So then after doing that a few times, I think it's instilled with confidence, and the reluctance to be who you are, to speak your language, or to wear your hair how you want, as an expression of your identity, starts to break down. And so I think there is a lot to be said about the personal stance or charge that people take in response to prejudice or discrimination. And then I think the other perspective is like, what does it look like as a collective, right? What does it mean for a number of people to take a stance or a charge like that is aligned? And I think that's what we've been so fortunate at NACA to be able to experience, is like what happens when a critical mass of families, young people, educators, professionals believe that indigenous thought is a form of genius and should be incorporated into education. I think we've been experiencing that. So I think that is a response to the prejudice and to the misassumption that we are less than, or that our knowledge bases are less than, or or what have you. Yeah.
Thank you, Lakshi. Is that where you use hashtag inherently excellent?
That's exactly where you use it.
Perfect. Okay, coming on to our last question. And I think you already kind of answered this, and this can kind of go wherever you want it to as far as answers. But so if you choose to live the life that you envisioned, what changes in the near future? I'm going to change it to the near future because I think you mentioned a lot of good overall changes. But to live the life you envision, what changes in the near future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I read the questions where you sent them to me, and like they're sitting different with me now. I think the changes are kind of happening, right? Um, like the drastic change that has happened during COVID, right? Like we went into lockdown in early March or stay at home and then the George Floyd murder really kind of elevated emotions for the whole country and for sure individuals and for collectives, right? Like, and I think we're seeing like a mass of people in different countries taking stances that are aligned with platforms that have been lifted up in past decades for sure. But for some reason, because of because it was coming from marginalized communities or lesser represented communities and political spheres or social spheres, it wasn't as loud for some reason. And I think a combination of people feeling like emotionally spent, frustrated, angry by the number of people that are dying and getting sick, with being frustrated at decades and centuries of disproportionate violence and racism in this country. I think that a lot of change we've been witnessing in the form of like, even like the statues coming down, right? Like the Columbus statue came down, and in the Minneapolis St. Paul Oñate statues are coming down. Robert E. Lee statues are coming down. And people are beginning to critically analyze, well, who are we paying homage to, and what is the history that we're celebrating or glorifying? And I think that's part of the waking up, or the part of the change towards prejudice. I would like to see our communities band together, and I think there's a lot of cross movement messaging that's happening, right? Like indigenous people for Black lives, or they're even like the switch of POC to Black and indigenous people of color. I think we also do need to do some work in terms of the inclusion of undocumented and immigrant relatives, and also some truth telling around like the colonization of the lands to the south of here, whether that's Mexico, Central America, South America, because those are indigenous people who were colonized by the Spanish and have adopted national identities as a form of elimination of indigenous identity. And I think if we come together to acknowledge and to recognize, I think like the hashtag for a rapid response, I think we're stronger together, and like I've always felt that, and it's been a tactic and a strategy of colonization to separate, right? To divide, and I don't think we should do that to ourselves. I think that message should also go to us as tribes, because we've definitely adopted a political identity that is divisive, and wonder how we dismantle that a little bit, because one of the core pieces of sovereignty should be to determine who is or is not a part, or qualifications for membership. Yeah, I know I could keep going on tangents on that one, but I think it's happening, and I would like to see us come together to like unify some of our messages.
Awesome. Thank you, Likshu. That was super thoughtful and insightful. And yeah, do you have anything else to add as we're coming to the end of the interview?
I don't think so. Well, everyone says that and then says something else, right? I caught myself doing that. I'm like, why do people do that? No, I mean, identity's on my mind just because I think in this time of COVID, we're all having to like look ourselves in the mirror, and we need to be okay with what we see, and figuratively and literally, right? And there's times where we've all struggled with our own self-esteem, confidence issues related to who we are, and the color of our skin, the way we talk, where we're from, how we wear our hair, the concept of beauty, all this kind of stuff, right? And I think how do we unpack that a little bit and be okay with it? So, and it's deep, right? There's multiple layers. There's has to do with colonization. It has to do with your experience in school. It has to do with like, who your peer group and friends are. It has to do with where you grew up, all that kind of stuff. So just so I don't want folks to kind of like be good with it, be good with it, and really take this opportunity to kind of like do some of that introspection, because I think the work never stops, and it's not like you come to an epiphany one day and you're like, oh, I'm good for the rest of my life. You keep working on it, and if you're coming from one of the communities that have been disproportionately affected, like to find the genius and the beauty and who we've always been. That's the last thing I'll say.
That was awesome. Thank you, Likshu.